Today I thought we started out from batting practice all the way through the first inning. Really dialed in. The guys brought good energy from the beginning. I think they were hungry to play. We only got one game in, and we were in Oklahoma for 4 days, so pretty strange circumstances when we were in Stillwater. So it was really nice just to be home, get back to routine, reunite with our entire team, because that was the first weekend that we had a 30-man roster that we created. So there were some guys that were back in Morgantown. So to get everybody back together, all 40 healthy guys training, working, and playing today was awesome.
Is there any rhyme or reason to a first inning like that? You said you had good batting practice. So you know things are to start out well, or it just sort of evolves that way?
Yeah, I think it just evolved that way. It really was disciplined at bats. You let the game come. There was a lot of 3-2 counts. There was a lot of deep counts, but we ended up having probably 7 or 8 free passes in that first inning. So it wasn't really loud, other than Swain had the single that scored a couple, and then Hussey had the 3-run homer. But it was more guys that were just having disciplined quality at-bats and building a big inning. I'll have to give Cresser a hard time tomorrow, because I think he made the first 2 outs of the game, which I've never seen in my career.
I don't know if you guys go in with like a team-wide hitting approach, but when you get that many free passes that early, does something change? Like, you think you're up by so much, everyone gets the green light, but you're not seeing that many strikes. So is there change there?
Yeah, no change. You really preach to turn off the scoreboard and try to win every pitch. And so it takes a lot of focus when you go up 8 to continue to do that for the remainder of the game. So we have a lot of great players, and depth is our strength. So you want to see some players that need opportunities to get at-bats in the game quickly, but also they bring a different hunger for that at-bat in that moment, so it can keep your team going in the right direction. So they play a really important role there. And then they're working to get at-bats and have quality at-bats and to earn more playing time through those at-bats. I don't think an approach changed. I just think we did a really good job with the approach early in the game.
Coach, there's always been a love affair between baseball and numbers. Grant hit his 40th home run tonight. He didn't make a big deal out of it, but is there some significance to 40 home runs in a career?
Yeah, ton of significance. I don't know if I've ever been around somebody in my career that had 40 home runs. Whether I coached at Oklahoma State, and then I've now been here for 10 years. I think he's the first person that I've ever coached that had 40 home runs. And I didn't know it was his 40th, and he might have not known either. I think when we were at PNC last year playing Pitt, and he had the tying homer and then the go-ahead homer to beat Jerko's record, that's something I'll never forget. And then every time he hits one, you're kind of like, that's the all-time career guy doing what he does, hitting homers, especially opposite field at Ken Kendrick Family Ballpark. We've watched that movie before, and so it's a majestical thing that I don't take for granted. And when Hussey is no longer here, will certainly be missed, because it's just it's a really fun thing to watch, and you get to just kind of see him continue to collect upon his all-time record. And I think part of him wanting to be back and part of him saying, I want to come back for my senior year and be part of that, is to kind of cement himself as the greatest power hitter in history here.
He obviously kind of got off to a slow start, but he's starting to pick it up now.
Yeah, what a great story. I think he started 2 for 22,
Yeah.
speaking of numbers. And he's just gotten really hot. I don't know what he's hitting here, but hitting right now. But over the last 10 games, he's as good of a hitter as anybody in our lineup.
Pitching-wise, I mean, just one game over the weekend, you got 2 midweek, then you got a big conference series. It's got to be a little hard to sort of juggle, get people the number of pitches you want, but then not wear people out for the following weekend.
Yeah.
How do you manage that?
I don't think I did a very good job at Oklahoma State, honestly. Going into that game, it felt like a Game 7 World Series, winner take all. There's only one game, and so we were going to start Kern, GVK, and Estridge that weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and we threw all of them in one game. And I really went into Oklahoma State game saying that one game I don't want to get beat. I don't want to have anybody see a pitcher 2 or 3 times because everyone does usually a little bit worse at that point. And I let Kern get beat. He was beautiful through 3. He had 8 punchies. He was cruising, and I got greedy. And I ran him back out there, and they're good hitters. And Kern was great and just lost maybe a little bit of sharpness in that 4th and gave up maybe 2 or 3 homers really fast. And then I thought Estridge was the same way, where maybe left him in a little too long. We have depth. I keep saying that, and so I have to rely on the bullpen and, more importantly, trust the bullpen as the head coach and give those guys the ball. And so we did good. We won the game. I just felt like I probably should have gone to the bullpen a little bit earlier and trust. It's a two-way street, right? If you take your starter out after 3 and then the guy that comes in gets whacked and gives up 4 homers, you are an idiot for pulling your starter too early. I think that happened with Snell in a postseason game. Everybody questioned a lot. But that being said, you get into these 2 games, it was kind of nice because we didn't use a lot of our bullpen. So really we have guys that need to throw. So Lyman ending that game today, we were up 10 runs or whatever. He's a guy that we need ready for Arizona. And so he pitched today because I want to have him have more rest to be ready for Friday. He's been great for us. And so a lot of our guys have done such a good job pitching when the score was a little bit lopsided and turning the scoreboard off. Lyman's been great at that. Tyler Hudson has been great at that. Estridge never cares the role or the situation. Just give me the ball. When you do it, I'm going to pitch great. And there's usually more to the story than sometimes the kids understand, right? You're setting them up to be successful in certain spots. And so Lyman was a great example of that. Porco threw today in a lopsided score. And so if you're in the opposing dugout, sometimes you're like, why are the guys that are throwing 96 in the game when we're down 8 right now? It's just because we need to get them work in innings, and we don't want them to be rusty when we get to the weekend.
You ready for another one on numbers?
Yes.
Sam White's hitting streak, we were looking up the ruling today on the official scoring on walks. Doesn't end a hitting streak, so technically he's at 14 games. Did you know about the rule, and what does it take for him to be that consistent to get a hit every game?
Yeah, didn't know the rule and didn't know the streak, to be perfectly honest. So you're saying if you draw a walk, period, that extends the hitting streak.
That's all.
Right.
it is.
Just
Well,
doesn't
he
count.
drew 3
Just
walks
doesn't
against
exist.
Townsend.
It's like that game didn't
Right.
exist.
Okay.
Yeah, so it did, so when he drew the 3 walks against Townsend, it didn't end his hitting streak.
Yeah, that's amazing. That makes a lot of sense, though.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it makes perfect sense because it's kind of out of your control.
If you're a baseball purist, though, does it make sense? I mean,
I think so.
Okay.
I just learned of the rule, but I think so because it's out of your control.
Sure.
You could have somebody not ever throw a ball over the plate, so you live for another day on the streak. I think it makes a little bit of sense, but Sam has done incredible. We were talking post-game. You almost have to be monk-like to be as consistent as him because there's so many emotions that go into the game. Scoreboards change, weather change. You're doing great, you're doing poorly. He really lives pitch by pitch. Like, he doesn't let the last at-bat affect the at-bat. He doesn't let the defense affect him. He had a stretch there where he had a couple errors, and one of the errors, we ended up losing that game in the 9th with Kennesaw. And the next day, he had an error to start the game and hit a 3-run homer. He just can really separate everything really well. And so I always say, whether he's good or bad, it's not because he was in his head. He always kind of moves forward. So I think that's what it takes to have those kind of hit streaks and that kind of consistency.
his transition to second base, I mean, obviously he had a great defensive play tonight, but, what are you seeing out of his play at second?
He's been fantastic. Couldn't ask for anything more. Love when he handles the majority of the double plays at second base. He ranges well. Most importantly, just his leadership skills and holding runners at second base. Oklahoma State's had some injuries and some unknowns. They haven't loved everybody that they've had in the middle. And so interchanging middle infield is very difficult because you're working with pitchers. There's some timing of releases when they get out of when they move out of position, that's when the pitcher delivers the pitch. And so all of a sudden with some new bodies in there, it can get clunky and it can get a little bit less methodical. You want the pitchers to know who's going to be in the middle infield every day. And so they just bring us that consistency that we wanted. Chase Swain can play second. Ellis can play second. Merritt could probably play second. There are a lot of different players, but we'd like to keep those middle guys consistent.
You mentioned your roster limitations that you have in Big 12 games,
Mhm.
not to skip over tomorrow, but does that come into play at home too, or is that just the road? But then on down the line when you're going on the road, you've had a hard enough time deciding who to play, who to put in there, as well as everyone's been playing. How much more difficult is that going to be getting down to that limit?
Yeah. I think you want it to be difficult. Like, you really want to go back and forth and think about it. The players are working extremely hard to be their best version. And so if I'm not struggling with it, I'm not really doing my job. So you want to give guys as many opportunities as possible so you can wrangle it and stress about it, and coaches can disagree, and you want all that back and forth because it matters. Like, this is their life. They're working diligently to get opportunities, and so you just want that to be the situation for them always. Today, some guys that didn't travel with us to Oklahoma State had big days off the bench. Lumsden had 3 quality at-bats. Ellis Garcia had a quality at-bat. Valdez hadn't got a ton of playing time. He was with us on the trip, but he had the walk-off single tonight. Guzman hadn't played in a little while. He had 2 quality at-bats and a single up the middle and felt like 10 stolen bases. Merritt hadn't played a bunch, and he got a knock. So you just had some guys that contributed that hadn't as much, and that's what a team is. Like, keeping guys fresh, keeping guys in the loop, developing when you can, picking your spots. And so I was really pleased with their performance because it's hard. When you don't play every day, it's very difficult to come off the bench. You don't know when you're going to play. You have to actually be mentally prepared more than physically. You have to be ready to get called. Georgie Valdez, I called when Logan was on deck. He had no time. It was just like, I got to get my batting gloves on and go try to perform. And the performances matter. So really proud of what they did.
Coach, what were your thoughts on the total number of runners left on base? I mean, it didn't really end up mattering as it was such a lopsided score after the first inning, but you had 14 total, and that's a pretty big number.
Yeah, for sure. I think that goes with maintaining focus throughout the game. And so it's very difficult to turn the scoreboard off because you can feel comfortable. And if you want to be good and you want to perform at a high level, you have to be extremely dialed in on every pitch, every minute. You have to be in the game. You have to know what the pitcher's throwing. You have to be very mentally engaged. So in hour 2 and 3 of a lopsided score, I think we might have lost some focus offensively. And then some circumstantial. If you score 100 runs and have a lot of base runners on, eventually someone has to get out. And so it's both of those things combined, in my opinion.
Had Sam played much second base before this year, like in high school or anything?
0.
Yeah.
Yeah, he'd never played second base. Recruited him as a third baseman, primarily out of high school and in the summer. And then he played third base freshman year, left field, caught a little bit last year, sophomore year, and then we moved him to second. He's really the definition of a Swiss Army knife utility guy. Thanks, guys.